You're listening to the Labor Notes podcast, our weekly show on rank and file organizing news and tactics. I'm pod co-host Danielle Smith and organizer at Labor Notes.
And I'm Natasha Elena Ullman, pod co-host and a staff writer at Labor Notes. Something we try to remember lately as workers deal with mass ICE raids and militarized police in their cities while just trying to fight for better on the job is that it doesn't have to be like this, and that it won't always be like this.
It can help to start with a vision for a point in the future. Today, we want to think about May 2028. After the United Auto Workers stand-up strike 2 years ago, where members won record contracts and timed them to expire so that they'd be able to strike on May Day 2028, the International's president, Shawn Fain, called for others to do the same. The union took its moment in the headlines to remind working people that the rights and benefits we have today, which the billionaire class is attempting to degrade, are the legacy of workers organizing in the U.S. Quote, May Day was born out of the intense struggle by workers in the United States to win an 8-hour day. That's a struggle that is just as relevant today as it was in 1889, the UAW said at the time, referring to the year that unions made May 1st International Workers' Day.
So fast forward to today. Workers and their unions are facing unprecedented attacks at their work sites, in the courts, in the streets, as this administration carries out a political program to consolidate executive power, to dismantle hard-fought-for government programs that support working people, to disenfranchise them on the job and at the polls, and to scapegoat immigrants for an economy that billionaires have rigged in their favor. You might be hearing that message a lot lately, so here are some numbers. The world's 10 richest men doubled their wealth during the pandemic, while retail, service, and other frontline workers were briefly labeled heroes. Heroes who had to fight for what little hazard pay and protective gear they got for a moment before things returned to an untenable status quo for them. Elon Musk is on course to become the world's first trillionaire within the decade, with 4 other billionaires hot on his tracks. I think $1 trillion is a number that's worth contextualizing, so let's say tomorrow you land a cushy executive job making $10,000 an hour. It would take you about 50 years, assuming a normal 40-hour work week, to make $1 billion. $1 trillion would take you 48,077 years. There is simply no way that you can earn $1 trillion. Similarly, worker pay hasn't kept up with productivity gains for decades, which means your boss is making more from every hour of your labor. No wonder then that CEO pay has soared by 10,085% over the last few decades.
This kind of coordinated assault on our rights and livelihoods warrants a coordinated response. That's where May Day 2028 comes in. We're talking about it now because the time to start planning is now. Natasha and our coworkers Luis Feliz Leon and Keith Brower-Brown, who are all here today, have put together a new Labor Notes resource to support contract alignment in the lead up to 2028. The site takes you through the rationale and history of coordinated strikes, some frequently asked questions, and gets into how union members can start laying the groundwork. Luis and Keith, thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for making this podcast a reality.
We are really excited about this resource and to talk about some of the pieces of it that union members in contract fights right now might find the most useful. But maybe let's start by taking a step back and talking about the history of the coordinated strike. Why does it matter that we think about this type of mass action, and what fights from the past and international movements can we draw on to build towards this?
May Day 2028 can be a means to demonstrate widespread worker power as a counterforce that is capable of checking the billionaire power grab, the billionaires' incursions into our daily lives, as Danielle was talking about in the intro. We also need to recognize our challenges. The labor movement has been in decline in the past several decades for many reasons, including cozy relationships with employers, the weak enforcement of labor laws to rein in union busting, and the proliferation of right-to-work laws. But we also have roadmaps to rebuild working class power, deepen democracy within our unions, and build the fighting class struggle institutions of a unified multiracial working class. We can tap into the currents that brought us the class organizations, rights, and strengths we do have, going back directly to previous eras of labor militancy when miners, steel workers, rail workers, and auto workers put their bodies on the line against wage cuts and for safer workplaces and decent humane working conditions. Today, the rhetoric of culture war fills the airwaves. It streams into our phones, and it has led us into this really scary place where things that we thought were vestiges of the past, like a turbocharged xenophobia and bigotry that is now permissible in ways that before was just whispered in dog whistles, that mainstream discourse is really creating a situation in which there is broad latitude to target the most vulnerable members of our class. A record 170 billion has been earmarked for border and immigration enforcement, and there is a target on the backs of working people, regardless of immigration or sometimes even citizenship status. Racial profiling is the law of the land. We're already experiencing the effects of summary layoffs of government workers and attempts to terminate their hard-won collective bargaining agreements. And we're also seeing attacks on the National Labor Relations Board and cuts to agencies that regulate workplace safety, including the Occupational Health and Safety Administration. But we've all seen this before. Any of us that have tried to organize a tenant association and has dealt with greedy landlords or anyone that's been organizing in their workplace, we are familiar that the boss campaigns are all similar. They use fear to cow us, to intimidate us, to make us feel that there's nothing else that we can gain by organizing. So as Sean Fain wrote for In These Times last year, we need to reclaim our country's history of militant trade unions that united workers across race, gender, and nationality. Striking is a skill and strength that a fighting labor movement needs to cultivate again. We need to sharpen it as an effective tool against the unrelenting top-down control we experience in the workplace and outside of it. We want to throw down the gauntlet and say this is a challenge for us. When democracy is under attack, we are our best hope. And in this particular moment, we also have to draw on the radical traditions that have transformed this country. And those traditions sometimes are outside of the labor movement. The civil rights movement has a lot to teach us, for example, about heroism in the face of state terror, and offers us tactical lessons that can allow us to disrupt business as usual. It also offers a deeply resonant narrative of right and wrong. Moral suasion has its limits, but we also have to be storytellers of a different world, informed by different values of collective struggle and solidarity. Everything that we're seeing around us right now is trying to break the bonds that we have forged over generations to live in a multiracial democracy that, even though it's always been a sham in the economic sphere, it was, through hard-won struggle, better than what came before. So now we need to engage in one of the most powerful struggles for democratic renewal. Democratic renewal in our unions, democratic renewal in society, democratic renewal everywhere.
So, what does May Day 2028 actually mean? Because when people think general strike, it might conjure images of millions of workers all taking the streets on the same day. But that might not be exactly what we're talking about here, right?
It may look a little different than that, but it does look like there are at least a couple 100,000 union members across the country lining up contracts to expire around May 2028. So one of the big contributions that Luis, Natasha, and I wanted to make putting this website together, may2028.org, is to track contracts that are going to expire in this period so that people can find out if another local in their union, maybe their own local, or a local in their area has an expiring contract. And maybe this can be fuel for the fire if you're trying to get your union to set its contract to expire in this period. You can say, hey, all these other unions in our sector are expiring around this time or in our area. We want to be a part of this movement together. So some of the highlights, of course, are the UAW at the big three auto companies have about 150,000 workers whose contract will expire on May 1st. That's what kicked it all off. But we've also got within a couple months of that, if not exactly on May 1st, longshore workers, the ILWU at West Coast ports, about 20,000 workers have a contract expiring. We see California teachers and some big UFCW or United Food and Commercial Workers in the grocery sector in multiple parts of the country are expected to, based on some of our sources, be lining up their contracts for April, May, that time period in 2028. So between all those together, looking at well north of 250,000 workers lining up contracts for that period, and hopefully more can happen in the next few years. And part of the site is to give you some resources to go to your local and organize your coworkers and the rank and file in your local, most importantly, to get active. But what happens if it's not all 10 million members of the organized labor movement who go on strike at this time? The big question is how these unions can be the kernel of a much larger working class movement and do more than just demonstrations or rallies, but try and get working people who are connected to these unions through family connections, through their kids' sports teams, through their kids' schools, through churches, through other kinds of community organization, to be a part of building pressure on the billionaires that are wrecking all of our lives right now for their own profit. And at Labor Notes, we're working on a new kind of event called Fight Back Schools. And as part of the site, we're sharing a toolkit to run a Fight Back school in your town, in your region. And the idea here is to get together local union activists and maybe some community activists too, to come up with, here are some shared problems we're feeling from the billionaire attacks and this administration that is the leading edge of those billionaire attacks right now. Find some of that common ground of whether it's Medicaid cuts to the VA, attacks on immigrants. There's many places you might find that you didn't realize you had overlap and that it wasn't just your problem, but something people in this other union next to you are experiencing too. Figure out those shared problems. Second, figure out some shared targets. Every region of this country has bad guys. I hate to break the news, but there are big landlords, bankers, maybe even billionaires within an hour's drive of many, if not most of us in this country who are a part of advancing this agenda, either through bankrolling the politicians pushing it through directly profiting off of this agenda themselves. And we can find these people and we can put some pressure on them through direct action, through legal means, but through concerted pressure to show we are really mad and we're not backing down. And that process of coming up with what creative action and pressure looks like is what's most important. And a big goal that we have in putting this Fight Back School idea out there is that it's not just the meal that you come up with, it's the kitchen that really matters. It's the process of democracy of union workers, community members, figuring out that they have the creative mischief that they can come up with together. That's the kind of strength that can come out of this process building up to May 2028 that we want to be a part of helping local groups build around the country. So check out the toolkit. If it sounds interesting, if you know some other union members, especially in a group of local unions around you, please reach out to us and we can try and help you put that on. Whether or not it's through our Fight Back School thing, please think about how you can use this build up to May 2028. Whether you're in a union with an expiring contract or not, you can be a part of this sort of coalition building, the sort of democratic process of the rank and file of the working class, figuring out where we have leverage to stir up some trouble for the billionaire class. That's what's going to push through a real fight back. Whether or not it's in the form of a general strike, we can still make a huge impact if we do it that way.
Thank you for taking us through all those resources, Keith. And I love that analogy about the kitchen. I mean, have you ever gone to dinner at someone's house and then seen the kitchen and been kind of like, ooh? So taking another step back, I wanted to ask, why might a coordinated strike be the right approach? And what are some of the features of the site that people would find most useful to build those next steps?
Yeah, so I think many of us have been experimenting with a variety of tactics to fight back against the billionaire assault on working people. Protests, boycotts, legislative efforts, and of course, all of these are really important tools. But on their own, they haven't been able to deliver the changes we need so desperately in this moment. Frankly, they haven't even been enough to halt the flurry of attacks on working people, let alone reverse the tide. We know that the people in power are never going to give us a single inch without a fight. So the question then is, where is our leverage? And, well, as working people, we have a key point of leverage. The billionaire class depends on our labor. To take an obvious example, Jeff Bezos isn't, running around in an Amazon warehouse packing, sorting, and shipping your order before it arrives at your doorstep. Working people do, and without them, he wouldn't be able to fulfill a single order or make a single cent. The same is true in every industry and workplace across the country. Our work keeps everything running. That means that we as working people have tremendous power. If we collectively withhold our labor, we can stop the flow of profits and force the ruling class to the table.
That sounds amazing. So, why aren't we doing this tomorrow? Why are we waiting till 2028?
That is something I hear a lot, that given this political moment, we can't afford to wait to take action, and that is absolutely true. But the thing is, you can't just speak a mass strike into existence. You've got to get your coworkers on board, align your union contract if you have one, not just at one workplace, but on a national scale. And that's going to take time. And having a unified date to aim for can help us make sure that we're all moving in the same direction. But that said, we're definitely not saying you should just sit around and wait for 2028 to roll around. There's a lot we can and should be doing right now to prepare. Over the next few weeks, as Keith mentioned, we'll be releasing a toolkit about something we're calling Fight Back Schools. And yeah, it's sort of a guide for getting together with other people in a room to identify shared problems, generate shared demands, and yeah, locate where that leverage is to win the things that we want to see. We will say more about that in an upcoming episode. But in the meantime, that's just to say, there's a lot we can do in this moment, and our 2028 guide lays out some of it with a few different scenarios. If you're a union officer, you can hold membership meetings to discuss aligning your contract. Before that, you can bring members from your union and others to plan coalition actions. If you're a union member, you'll want to get people on board, meet with stewards and bargaining team members, and maybe create a member petition to show interest in alignment. And of course, if you're not in a union, organize, then join for May Day. If you need support, reach out to the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee, a volunteer network that supports union organizing campaigns. They can connect you with someone who's been through it and can talk you through the process. Again, that's the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee, or EWOC, pronounced like the cuddly-looking aliens who helped the Rebel Alliance defeat their Imperial adversaries in The Return of the Jedi. Anyway, you can reach them, the organizers, not the little Star Wars bears, at workerorganizing.org. The last thing I'll say is if you've already aligned your contract or if you're working towards it and have tips on what's worked well or what hasn't, reach out to us. We're keeping track of what locals have taken the pledge, and we'll also be updating the site as we get feedback. You can write us at labornotes@labornotes.org.
One last note, don't forget that you can now voice notice your organizing questions, and we'll try to answer them on air. You can send them in to podcast@labornotes.org. That's our episode. Rate us or leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. If you're listening to us on Podbean at labornotespodcast.podbean.com, download our episode.
We also have more Troublemaker Schools coming up in October. We've got the Troublemaker Schools in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on Saturday, October 4th, in Puget Sound on Sunday, October 12th, and in Toronto, Canada on Saturday, October 18th. You can sign up at labornotes.org/events.
The Labor Notes podcast is produced by Natasha Alina Ullman, Sindhu Sundar, and myself. Our title music was written and performed by our coworker, Keith Brower Brown. See you next week. Solidarity, all.